Children rarely understand lies, but they always remember who made their mother cry. The rain had already begun to fall over Caldwell Estate when Ethan Caldwell's black SUV turned into the long stone driveway nearly 6 hours earlier than anyone expected. His meeting in Boston had ended ahead of schedule after the final signatures were placed on a billion-dollar acquisition, and for the first time in months, the 38-year-old billionaire found himself looking forward to a quiet evening at home instead of another celebration surrounded by executives. The mansion stood as elegant as ever beneath the grey afternoon sky, its white columns glowing softly against the gathering storm, everything appearing exactly as it always did. Perfect. Ordered. Untouchable. Or so he believed. Before the driver could even open the door, a tiny figure burst across the front lawn, sneakers splashing through puddles with fearless determination. 3-year-old Noah Parker wrapped both little arms around Ethan's leg before the billionaire could take a second step. Ethan smiled automatically. The little boy belonged to Grace Parker, one of the housemaids who had worked at the estate for more than 3 years. Noah often visited during weekends whenever childcare arrangements fell through, and although Ethan rarely had time for long conversations, the cheerful toddler had somehow become the brightest little face in a house built on schedules and silence. Ethan crouched until they were eye level. "Hey there, buddy. Aren't you supposed to be inside?" Noah didn't smile back. His blue eyes looked strangely serious, the way only a child could become when carrying something much heavier than words. Instead of answering, the boy grabbed Ethan's hand with both of his tiny palms and whispered, "Can you hide Mommy?" Ethan blinked. "Hide her?" Noah nodded quickly and glanced toward the mansion as if someone might hear. "The pretty lady gets mad when you're gone." Ethan's expression barely changed, but something tightened deep inside his chest. "Which pretty lady?" Noah pointed toward the front windows. "The one who's gonna marry you." Ethan followed the little finger toward the house. "Victoria Sinclair. His fiancée. Elegant. Charismatic. Admired by everyone who knew her? She had spent years convincing the world she possessed endless grace, endless patience, endless kindness." Noah tugged at Ethan's sleeve again. His voice became even quieter. "Mommy says I'm not supposed to tell, but she cries after the pretty lady smiles." The words landed with unsettling weight. Before Ethan could ask another question, the heavy front door opened. Victoria appeared at the entrance wearing a cream-colored dress, her smile as polished as the diamonds resting on her left hand. "Ethan," she called warmly. "You're home early. What a wonderful surprise." She descended the steps with perfect composure, but Noah instantly moved behind Ethan's leg, clutching the fabric of his pants as though searching for shelter. Ethan noticed the movement. So did Victoria. For only a fraction of a second, something unreadable crossed her face before her familiar smile returned. "There's our little explorer," she laughed gently. "You've been keeping everyone busy today." Noah shook his head without speaking. Ethan looked down. The child's small fingers were trembling. Somewhere inside the house, a porcelain cup slipped from someone's hands and shattered against the marble floor. The sharp sound echoed through the grand entrance. Victoria turned her head for only a heartbeat before saying calmly, "Grace can be so clumsy sometimes." Ethan's eyes remained on Noah. The little boy slowly looked up at him, fighting tears he didn't fully understand, then whispered 7 words that erased every trace of triumph Ethan had carried home that afternoon. "Please don't let her make Mommy cry again." Ethan did not answer immediately. Instead, he rested one hand gently on Noah's shoulder while watching the little boy's eyes. During years of negotiating billion-dollar mergers, he had learned that adults often disguised the truth with polished language, rehearsed smiles, and carefully crafted excuses. Children possessed none of those skills. They simply described the world exactly as they experienced it. Victoria stepped closer, her heels clicking softly against the stone walkway. "Poor little." "Noah has such a vivid imagination," she said with a warm laugh that would have convinced almost anyone. "Grace has been overwhelmed lately, and I think he picks up on her stress." Ethan slowly stood, his expression unreadable. "Where is Grace?" Victoria hesitated for the smallest fraction of a second before answering. She is probably cleaning the east wing. I asked her to reorganize a few storage rooms this afternoon. Noah tightened his grip around Ethan's hand. Mommy is upstairs. The correction was quiet, almost whispered. Victoria smiled without looking at the child. He gets confused sometimes. Ethan simply nodded. I will check on her. He walked through the front doors with Noah still holding his hand. The familiar scent of polished oak, fresh flowers, and expensive candles filled the enormous foyer, yet something felt different. The mansion was unusually quiet. The staff members they passed greeted Ethan respectfully, but several lowered their eyes almost immediately afterward. It was subtle. Too subtle for most people to notice. Ethan noticed every single one. Maria, the elderly housekeeper who had served the Caldwell family for nearly 20 years, emerged from the hallway carrying fresh towels. Normally she greeted him with cheerful confidence. Today she stopped for barely a second before forcing a smile. Welcome home, Mr. Caldwell. Thank you, Maria. Have you seen Grace? The older woman's fingers tightened around the folded towels. She has been very busy today, sir. Before Ethan could ask another question, Victoria appeared beside him with effortless elegance. I sent Grace to finish organizing the old guest suites. They have needed attention for months. Maria opened her mouth as if she wanted to add something, but she quietly lowered her head instead. Ethan watched the exchange without comment. Noah suddenly let go of Ethan's hand and hurried toward the grand staircase. This way. His tiny footsteps echoed across the marble floor as he climbed several steps before stopping to look back. Ethan followed without hesitation. Victoria remained behind for just a moment. Her smile had disappeared completely. By the time she reached the staircase again, it had returned as though nothing had happened. The second floor stretched into a long hallway lined with family portraits and tall windows overlooking the rain-soaked gardens. Near the very end, one bedroom door stood slightly open. Noah pointed toward it but did not move any closer. Mommy is there. Ethan approached quietly. Through the narrow opening he saw Grace kneeling beside an open supply cabinet, carefully arranging folded linens onto the lowest shelf. She looked up the instant she sensed someone nearby. Surprise crossed her face, followed almost immediately by composure. Mr. Caldwell. I did not know you were coming home today. Her voice remained calm, but Ethan noticed the faint exhaustion beneath every word. Grace stood, smoothing her simple grey housekeeping uniform before offering the same respectful smile she always wore. Yet this time it never quite reached her eyes. Ethan had passed this woman hundreds of times over the last 3 years. He knew she worked hard. He knew she never complained. He knew she always finished before everyone else. Suddenly he realized how little he actually knew about the quiet woman who had spent years making his house feel like a home while remaining almost invisible inside it. Grace never looked toward Victoria. That was the first detail Ethan noticed. Every employee in the Caldwell estate naturally acknowledged his fiancée whenever she entered a room, but Grace kept her attention on the neatly folded towels in front of her, speaking only when spoken to. It was not disrespect. It was caution. The difference was almost invisible unless someone was paying close attention. Ethan leaned lightly against the doorway. You have been working since early this morning. Grace nodded politely. Yes, sir. Mrs. Sinclair asked me to reorganize the guest suites, the storage rooms, the linen closets, and prepare the ballroom inventory before tomorrow. Ethan glanced around the room. The shelves were already perfectly arranged. Every blanket folded to the same size. Every towel stacked with precise symmetry. It looked like work that should have taken an entire team. Did anyone help you? Grace smiled gently. Everyone has their own responsibilities. Before Ethan could continue, Victoria stepped into the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. There you are, she said cheerfully. I thought everyone could use a break. She handed 1 cup to Ethan before turning toward Grace. Unfortunately, there is still plenty left to finish downstairs. I also noticed fingerprints on the library windows. Grace accepted the comment with a quiet nod. I will take care of them. Ethan looked from one woman to the other. I thought the windows were cleaned yesterday. Victoria answered before Grace could speak. They were, but excellence requires consistency. You always say details matter. Ethan did say that. In business. Somehow hearing his own words repeated inside his home felt strangely different. Noah quietly walked into the room and wrapped both arms around Grace's waist. She instinctively placed one hand on his hair without interrupting the conversation. The small gesture lasted barely a second, yet Ethan noticed how quickly she withdrew her hand the moment Victoria looked in their direction, almost as if she feared being accused of neglecting her duties for comforting her own son. Mommy is tired, Noah said softly. Grace smiled down at him. I am all right, sweetheart. You did not eat lunch. The room became silent. Grace's smile remained exactly the same, but Ethan caught the faint hesitation before she answered. I was busy. Victoria laughed lightly. She insisted on finishing her assignments first. That kind of dedication is difficult to find these days. Ethan took a slow sip of coffee without breaking eye contact with Grace. Her uniform was spotless, yet the sleeves appeared slightly worn from constant washing. The soles of her shoes had nearly lost their tread. Everything about her reflected someone who quietly repaired every problem except her own. As Victoria continued speaking about floral arrangements for their engagement celebration, Ethan found himself watching the reflections in the nearby window instead of the people directly. Grace stood perfectly still whenever Victoria spoke, almost holding her breath until the conversation moved elsewhere. It reminded him of employees sitting across from hostile competitors during difficult negotiations, carefully measuring every word because one careless sentence could cost everything. When Victoria finally excused herself to answer a phone call, the atmosphere changed so suddenly that even Noah noticed. The little boy exhaled, leaned his head against his mother's side, and whispered with innocent relief, "She is gone now." Grace immediately knelt beside him. "Remember what Mommy told you. We always speak kindly about everyone." Noah nodded obediently, but then looked toward Ethan with complete sincerity. "Mommy is always kind. Even when nobody is kind back." Those simple words lingered in the quiet room long after the child stopped speaking, and for the first time since returning home, Ethan began to wonder whether the most important story inside his own house had been unfolding for years while he had been too busy building an empire to see it. That evening, the rain continued tapping gently against the tall windows while Caldwell Estate prepared for another elegant gathering, yet Ethan's attention no longer rested on guest lists or business calls. It remained fixed on the quiet patterns unfolding inside his own home. He excused himself from dinner preparations under the pretense of reviewing tomorrow's schedule and wandered through the mansion alone. The library stood spotless. The ballroom gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. Every silver frame reflected perfect order. Grace's work was everywhere, yet the woman herself remained invisible. As Ethan walked past the west hallway, he noticed something unusual. A fresh vase of white lilies had been moved from its usual table beside the staircase to a narrow console near the guest suites. It was a small detail, but Grace had never rearranged decorations without permission. Curious, he quietly continued down the hallway. Voices drifted from around the corner. He recognized Victoria immediately. Her tone was calm, refined, almost pleasant. "The flowers belong downstairs. Please remember that next time." Grace answered softly. "Yes, Mrs. Sinclair. I apologize. And the ballroom inventory still needs another review. I prefer perfection, Grace." "I understand." Ethan remained hidden where neither woman could see him. Nothing about the conversation sounded openly harsh. Every sentence was polite. Every word carefully chosen. Yet something beneath the surface felt strangely uncomfortable. Victoria never raised her voice. She never insulted Grace. She simply continued assigning one new responsibility after another, each delivered with the same flawless smile. After the ballroom, Victoria continued, "Please polish the dining room silver again. Then organize the storage pantry. I also noticed the upstairs windows could be clearer before tomorrow's guests arrive." Grace nodded quietly. "I will finish everything tonight." "Wonderful. I knew I could count on you." Victoria turned elegantly and walked away. Only after her footsteps disappeared did Grace slowly lean one hand against the hallway wall. She closed her eyes for a brief moment before taking a slow breath and continuing toward the ballroom with her supply cart. She never complained. She never questioned another assignment. She simply kept moving. Ethan watched silently. His business instincts began assembling pieces that refused to fit together. Every successful executive understood the difference between leadership and control. A good leader inspired effort. A controlling person created endless work that could never truly be completed. As he continued walking, Ethan entered the security office near the service entrance. The night supervisor, Daniel Brooks, immediately stood. "Good evening, Mr. Caldwell." Ethan glanced toward the wall of security monitors displaying dozens of camera angles throughout the estate. "Daniel, have any cameras been offline recently?" Daniel hesitated. "Only a few interior units, sir." "Which ones?" "The second-floor guest hallway, part of the west corridor, and the old sitting room. Mrs. Sinclair requested temporary maintenance because decorators were moving furniture this week." Ethan studied the screens without speaking. "When were they disconnected?" Daniel checked the digital log. "Almost 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks. Ethan slowly folded his arms. That timeline matched almost exactly when Noah had begun visiting the estate more frequently after his daycare reduced weekend hours. Behind him, the front door opened. Grace entered quietly carrying another basket of freshly folded linens while Noah skipped beside her, humming to himself. The little boy suddenly stopped beneath one of the dark security monitors mounted near the ceiling. He pointed upward and asked with complete innocence, "Mommy, is that why the pretty lady smiles here now?" Grace's face changed instantly. She gently lowered his small hand and whispered, "Come on, sweetheart. We have work to finish." Ethan looked from the silent monitor to Grace's worried expression. He said nothing at all. But deep inside, the first real question had finally replaced every convenient assumption he had believed until that day. Ethan slept very little that night. Long after the mansion had fallen silent, he remained alone in his private study, watching rain slide across the floor-to-ceiling windows while the words of a 3-year-old echoed with unsettling clarity. Children did not invent patterns. They repeated what they lived. At 6 o'clock the following morning, before the household had fully awakened, Ethan entered the estate security office carrying nothing except a cup of black coffee. Daniel Brooks immediately stood from his chair. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell." Ethan closed the office door behind him. "I want to review the security archives from the west corridor, the guest hallway, and the second floor for the past month." Daniel hesitated. "Sir, those cameras were listed as inactive because of maintenance." Inactive does not always mean disconnected. Daniel understood immediately. The estate maintained multiple layers of digital storage. Even when live feeds were interrupted, the central server often preserved fragments, system logs, and synchronization records. He began typing quietly while rows of timestamps filled the monitors. Several minutes passed before Daniel frowned. "This is unusual." Ethan stepped closer. "What is it?" The cameras were not malfunctioning. They were manually disabled and reactivated several times instead of remaining continuously offline. Ethan looked carefully at the timeline. Every interruption lasted between 15 and 30 minutes. Nearly all of them occurred during weekday afternoons, exactly when he attended board meetings downtown. "Can you recover anything?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Some temporary cache files may still exist. They are incomplete, but I can try." Ethan folded his arms and waited in silence. The room filled only with the soft hum of computers and the steady rhythm of rainfall outside. Finally, blurred images appeared on one monitor. The footage skipped every few seconds, more like scattered memories than complete recordings. Grace pushed a cleaning cart through the hallway. Victoria entered from the opposite direction. They spoke briefly. There was no audio. Victoria pointed toward another room before walking away. Grace quietly followed with her supplies. The recording ended. Another fragment appeared from a different day. Grace carried folded blankets down the stairs. Victoria stopped her again, handing over another list. Grace nodded politely before changing direction. Another interruption. Another missing segment. Another hallway. Ethan remained expressionless, but Daniel could see his jaw tighten. None of the recovered clips showed anything openly inappropriate. Yet together they revealed a clear pattern. Grace's assignments never ended. Every completed task immediately became two more. Every route through the mansion seemed redirected by Victoria. Every interruption happened beyond the disabled cameras. There is something else, Daniel said carefully. He opened the household maintenance records. During the past 3 weeks, more than 60 additional work requests had been entered under Grace Parker's employee profile. Window inspections. Storage inventories. Furniture polishing. Linen recounts. Decorative adjustments. Most required no immediate attention, yet each carried Victoria Sinclair's electronic approval. Ethan quietly studied the endless list. The workload assigned to one employee exceeded what several staff members normally completed together. He thought back to Grace's worn shoes, her untouched lunch, and the exhausted smile that never reached her eyes. None of it had seemed remarkable at the time because she had never complained. The office door suddenly opened a few inches before Noah's curious little face peeked inside. "Mr. Daniel, have you seen my mommy?" Daniel smiled warmly. "She is probably working already." Noah nodded as though he expected that answer. Then he looked at Ethan and asked with innocent sincerity, "When people smile all the time, can they still make someone sad?" The room became completely still. Ethan slowly knelt until he was eye level with the child. For several long seconds, he searched Noah's face, seeing neither fear nor anger, only honest confusion. It was in that quiet moment that Ethan made a decision. He would not confront anyone. Not yet. He would watch. He would listen. And this time, he would finally see everything that had remained hidden inside the home he thought he knew so well. From that morning forward, Ethan changed nothing on the surface. He attended meetings, approved contracts, discussed seating arrangements for the engagement celebration, and treated everyone with the same calm professionalism he always had. Only one difference existed. He was watching. The billionaire who had built an empire by noticing details other people ignored had finally turned those instincts toward his own home. Victoria noticed none of it. She moved through Caldwell Estate with effortless confidence, greeting employees with polished courtesy whenever Ethan was nearby. Her smile remained flawless. Her voice remained gentle. She even praised Grace more frequently than before, thanking her for working so hard in front of other staff members. To anyone passing through the hallway, she appeared thoughtful and generous. But Ethan had begun noticing what happened after the compliments. Every expression of gratitude was followed by another assignment. Every finished responsibility somehow created two more. Grace never objected. She simply accepted each new task with the same quiet dignity that had made her nearly invisible for years. Late that afternoon, Ethan deliberately cancelled his final conference call and remained inside his study with the door slightly open. From there he could hear the rhythm of the household without being seen. Footsteps crossed the hallway. Victoria's voice floated through the silence with perfect composure. "Grace, after you finish preparing the guest rooms, please reorganize the wine cellar inventory. I would also like every picture frame in the east corridor polished before dinner." Grace answered exactly as she always did. "Yes, Mrs. Sinclair." Several minutes later another request arrived. Then another. Ethan looked at the clock. The list had become impossible to complete before midnight, yet Grace never pointed that out. Instead, she quietly adjusted her schedule and continued working. Curious, Ethan walked toward the kitchen through the service corridor. Inside, Maria was preparing dinner while two younger employees arranged fresh bread baskets. Their conversation stopped the moment Ethan entered. "Please continue," he said calmly. No one spoke. Finally Maria sighed softly. "Mr. Caldwell, may I ask you something?" Ethan nodded. "Have you ever noticed that Grace is always the last person to leave?" Ethan remained silent. Maria lowered her eyes before continuing. "She arrives before sunrise and usually goes home after everyone else. She always says she does not mind because she needs the hours." One of the younger employees quietly added, "She also covers other people's shifts whenever Mrs. Sinclair asks." "Does Grace volunteer?" Ethan asked. The kitchen fell silent again. No one answered directly. They simply exchanged uncertain glances that revealed far more than words could have. At that moment Noah wandered into the kitchen carrying a box of crayons almost as large as his small arms. "Mommy forgot her lunch again," he announced with complete innocence. Maria's face softened. She prepared a small sandwich and handed it to the little boy. Noah smiled gratefully and hurried away. Ethan watched him disappear down the hallway before quietly asking, "Does this happen often?" Maria looked toward the floor. "More often than it should." Ethan thanked everyone and walked away without another question. Upstairs, he paused outside the ballroom where Grace carefully adjusted rows of chairs for the upcoming celebration. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting long golden lines across the polished hardwood floor. Grace moved slowly now, not because she lacked determination, but because exhaustion had settled into every careful step. She never realized Ethan was standing quietly beyond the doorway. She simply straightened another chair, gently brushed away a speck of dust that no guest would ever notice, and whispered almost to herself, "Just a little more." Ethan felt something unfamiliar settle heavily inside him. It was not anger. Not yet. It was the uncomfortable realization that the strongest person in his house might also be the one who had spent years carrying the greatest burden without asking anyone to notice. The engagement gala arrived beneath a clear autumn sky, and by sunset Caldwell Estate shimmered with soft golden lights, polished marble, and the quiet confidence of old wealth. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway while executives, philanthropists, and longtime family friends stepped through the grand entrance carrying carefully wrapped gifts and polished smiles. Every guest believed they had come to celebrate a perfect future. Ethan greeted each arrival with his usual calm composure, yet behind his steady expression every detail was unfolding exactly as he intended. Earlier that morning he had quietly instructed Daniel to restore every security camera without announcing the change. He had also asked the information technology team to recover every available system log from the previous month while an outside forensic specialist examined the household records. No accusations had been made. No confrontation had taken place. Ethan wanted certainty before speaking a single word. Across the ballroom, Victoria moved gracefully through the crowd, accepting compliments about her elegant white gown and thanking guests for attending. She appeared radiant, completely unaware that Ethan had spent the previous 48 hours assembling a picture very different from the one everyone admired. Grace remained almost invisible, wearing the same modest housekeeping uniform while quietly refilling glasses, adjusting table settings, and making certain every guest felt welcome. Noah sat near the kitchen entrance with a coloring book, happily drawing houses, flowers, and smiling faces while Maria checked on him whenever Grace hurried past with another tray. Ethan noticed something that no one else seemed to see. Every time Grace finished one responsibility, Victoria intercepted her with another request. Fresh flowers needed rearranging. Additional chairs needed moving. Decorative candles needed replacing even though they already looked perfect. Grace answered each instruction with the same respectful nod before continuing without complaint. The guests interpreted it as efficiency. Ethan now recognized it as a pattern. During the evening he quietly approached several longtime employees one at a time. He never asked leading questions. He simply invited honesty. Maria admitted she had watched Grace skip meals more than once because her assignments continued through lunch. The groundskeeper explained that Grace often remained at the estate long after everyone else had gone home. Another employee revealed that completed work was frequently inspected again only to generate another list of unnecessary tasks. None of them described shouting or dramatic scenes. Instead, they described something quieter, something that slowly exhausted a person without leaving obvious marks. Piece by piece, the same story emerged from people who had never spoken together. Ethan thanked each of them and asked for complete discretion. As the orchestra began playing a gentle piano melody, Noah wandered into the ballroom carrying his latest drawing. He walked directly toward Ethan with the fearless confidence only children possess. The paper showed a large house beneath a bright blue sky. One side of the picture held Ethan, Grace, Noah, and Maria standing together beneath a smiling sun. Far away on the opposite side stood Victoria by herself beneath a grey cloud. Ethan knelt beside the little boy and smiled gently. "Tell me about your picture." Noah pointed toward the group beneath the sunshine. "These are the people who make home feel happy." Then he pointed toward the lonely figure beneath the cloud. "She always likes it when nobody is watching." Ethan looked quietly at the drawing before folding it with great care and placing it inside the pocket of his jacket. Across the ballroom, Victoria raised her champagne glass, smiling confidently as guests applauded the future she believed was already hers. Ethan returned her smile with the same calm expression everyone expected from him, but deep inside he knew the celebration was about to become something entirely different. Before the night ended, the truth would no longer belong to whispers hidden in empty hallways. It would stand where everyone could finally see it. The orchestra finished its final piece just as Ethan stepped onto the small stage prepared for the engagement toast. Crystal glasses caught the warm light from the chandeliers while every conversation slowly faded into respectful silence. Victoria approached him with effortless confidence, slipping naturally to his side as photographers raised their cameras. She believed the evening had reached its happiest moment. Ethan accepted the microphone, thanked every guest for sharing such an important celebration, and smiled with the calm composure that had made him one of the most respected business leaders in the country. "Before we continue," he said evenly, "there are a few people I would like to recognize." His words surprised Victoria only slightly. She assumed he planned to thank the event planners or his executive team. Instead, Ethan looked toward the back of the ballroom. "Maria, Daniel, and every member of our household staff, would you please join us for a moment?" A gentle wave of confusion moved through the guests as the employees slowly gathered near the front of the room. Grace remained behind, quietly holding an empty serving tray, clearly hoping to avoid attention. Ethan noticed immediately. "Grace, please come as well." She hesitated before setting the tray aside and walking forward with her usual quiet dignity. Noah smiled brightly when he saw his mother standing beside the others and hurried to hold her hand. Ethan nodded toward the large projection screen behind the stage. "Over the past several days I have spent time reviewing how this home truly operates. Not through assumptions, but through facts." Daniel activated the screen. Instead of dramatic recordings, a carefully organized timeline appeared. Security logs showed repeated camera interruptions. Maintenance records displayed dozens of unnecessary work assignments entered under Grace's name. Calendar comparisons demonstrated that those assignments consistently multiplied whenever Ethan attended meetings away from the estate. Next came statements collected independently from several longtime employees. Each described the same pattern of endless additional tasks, missed breaks, and constant reassignment. No voices were raised inside the ballroom. No accusations filled the air. The evidence spoke quietly for itself. Victoria's confident smile slowly disappeared. "Ethan," she began gently, "there has to be an explanation." Ethan looked at her calmly. "I agree. That is why I waited until I understood the full picture." He removed a folded drawing from the inside pocket of his jacket. The paper had softened after days of being carried close to his heart. He opened it carefully so everyone could see Noah's simple drawing of sunshine, clouds, and the people who made a house feel safe. The first person who warned me was not an executive, an attorney, or a security consultant, Ethan said softly. It was a 3-year-old child who asked me to protect his mother. The ballroom became completely silent. Noah looked up at Grace with innocent pride, unaware that his honesty had changed everything. Grace gently squeezed his tiny hand, her eyes glistening though she never spoke a single word. Ethan turned toward the guests once more. A home is not measured by its size or its beauty. It is measured by how the people with the least power are treated when nobody believes anyone important is watching. He placed the drawing beside the microphone, then faced Victoria one final time. Trust is the foundation of every relationship I build, whether in business or in life. Once trust disappears, the future disappears with it. No anger colored his voice. No humiliation followed. Only quiet certainty. Every guest understood the decision before another word needed to be spoken, and within the stillness of the magnificent ballroom, the image of perfection finally gave way to the quiet strength of truth. The following morning, Caldwell Estate felt different. Not because the marble floors had changed or the gardens looked any greener beneath the early autumn sun, but because silence no longer carried fear. Employees greeted one another with relaxed smiles instead of cautious glances, and for the first time in years Grace walked through the front hallway without immediately searching for another impossible list of tasks waiting on a polished silver tray. Ethan had quietly arranged for every member of the household staff to receive a personal meeting that week, not to investigate them, but to listen. One by one they shared small moments that had seemed too insignificant to mention before. Tiny worries. Quiet sacrifices. Long hours accepted without complaint. Ethan realized that leadership inside a home required the same attention as leadership inside a company. People did not always need someone to solve every problem. Sometimes they simply needed someone willing to notice. Grace expected that her employment would end after everything that had happened. Instead, Ethan invited her into his study with Noah sitting beside her, his little legs swinging happily from the oversized leather chair. Sunlight poured through the windows, warming the room that had once felt intimidating to every employee. Ethan placed a neatly organized folder on the desk. "This is not a reward," he said gently. "It is something I should have done a long time ago." Inside was a new employment agreement with fair working hours, additional paid leave, educational assistance, and childcare support whenever Noah needed to stay at the estate. There was also an offer to become household operations coordinator, a position that would allow Grace to supervise schedules so that no employee would quietly carry an unreasonable workload again. Grace stared at the papers for several moments before looking up. "Mr. Caldwell, I have never asked for any of this." Ethan nodded. "I know. That is exactly why you deserve to be asked." Tears gathered quietly in Grace's eyes, but she smiled the same gentle smile she had carried through every difficult day. This time it finally reached her eyes. Noah looked back and forth between the two adults before asking the question only a child would think to ask. "Does this mean Mommy gets to come home before bedtime now?" Ethan smiled. "Yes, buddy. That is exactly what it means." Noah jumped from the chair and wrapped both arms around his mother, laughing so freely that even Ethan found himself laughing with him. Weeks passed, and the estate slowly became known for something very different from luxury or influence. Visitors often remarked that everyone who worked there seemed genuinely respected. The atmosphere felt lighter. Kinder. More human. Grace never sought attention for what she had endured, and Ethan never spoke publicly about the engagement that never became a marriage. Some stories did not need headlines. They only needed better endings. One quiet Saturday afternoon, Ethan walked through the garden carrying a cup of coffee when he found Noah carefully planting small white flowers beside a stone pathway. "Mommy says flowers grow better when people are gentle," the little boy explained proudly. Ethan knelt beside him and helped press the last handful of soil around the tiny roots. Together they watched the breeze move through the garden without saying another word. Sometimes healing sounded exactly like that. Not applause. Not revenge. Just peace returning where fear once lived. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all was one that could never be measured in money or success. The strongest people are rarely the loudest. The kindest hearts are often the quietest. And the truth has a remarkable way of finding its voice, even when it first arrives through the simple words of a child who only wanted his mother to smile again.